Most heart advice you hear starts with a prescription pad, not a grocery list. And I understand why. A pill is fast. A pill is billable. Some of the strongest evidence for a healthy heart isn't sitting behind the pharmacy counter. It's sitting in produce aisle 3, 15 everyday foods. Ordinary ones, each one backed by real published research. Not folklore, not a guess dressed up as fact. I'm a retired nurse, not a cardiologist, and nothing here is meant to replace the person who actually reads your chart. What I can do is hand you what the journals actually say, translated into plain English. Wait until number 10. One randomized trial found it cut the risk of dying from heart disease by more than a quarter. Number 5 comes with a real caution, the kind your pharmacist would actually want you to hear. Number 14 is the one most people boil, drain, and pour straight down the sink without knowing what they just threw away. None of this replaces your cardiologist. Every bit of it is worth bringing to your next appointment. 15 foods, what the research actually says, and how I use each one in my own kitchen. Let's get started. Number 1, and it's about as unglamorous as breakfast gets, a bowl of plain oats, not the sugary instant packets, the plain, chewy kind that takes a few minutes on the stove. Oats carry a soft, soluble fiber called beta-glucan. Picture it like a sponge moving through your gut, soaking up some of the fat before it ever reaches your bloodstream. A review pooling 28 separate clinical trials found that about 3 grams of that fiber a day, roughly a bowl and a half of cooked oatmeal, lowered cholesterol in a real, measurable way. And it held up trial after trial. There's actual FDA-recognized language allowing oat products to carry a heart health claim right on the box, one of a small handful of foods with that kind of official backing. Regulators don't hand that out lightly. My grandmother, or maybe it was my great-aunt, my memory mixes those two up some mornings. She called oats poor man's medicine. Turns out she wasn't far off. Doctors know this. Dietitians know this. It just doesn't come up in a rushed visit, because nobody writes a prescription for oatmeal. Steel cut, rolled, doesn't matter much, so long as it isn't the instant kind loaded with sugar. That kind cancels out half the good before you've had your coffee. I've had folks tell me oatmeal is boring, and I understand the complaint. Cinnamon, a spoon of natural peanut butter, a handful of walnuts from a little further down this list. Dress it up however keeps you eating it 3 or 4 mornings a week. Consistency is what those 28 trials were actually measuring, not perfection. I stir in a spoon of ground flax and whatever fruit's on the counter. Simple. Cholesterol itself isn't the enemy people make it out to be. Your body needs some. It's the extra LDL riding around loose in your blood that causes trouble over the years, plaque building up slow, like sediment settling in a pipe nobody's flushed out. That's the whole appeal of oats. Cheap, patient, plain even, and still backed by nearly 3 decades of trials. Real, measurable, and sitting in most pantries already. Oat bran specifically, the outer layer where most of that fiber concentrates, tests even a bit stronger than rolled oats whole grain in some of these trials. Both work. Bran's just slightly more efficient if you're chasing every last point. The soluble fiber in oats also feeds the good bacteria living in your gut, and there's growing interest in how that gut community influences heart health downstream, though that piece of the puzzle is still being worked out in the research, and I won't overstate it here. Number 2, and this one swims. Salmon, sardines, mackerel. The fattier the better, oddly enough. A meta-analysis pooling 25 cohort studies and over 2 million people found that eating more fish was linked to a lower risk of dying from cardiovascular disease, and the more marine omega-3 fat in the diet, the stronger that link got. Every extra 20 grams of fish a day, that's a couple bites, was tied to about a 4% lower risk of cardiovascular death. Small on paper, added up over decades, and it isn't small at all. Here's the kitchen table version of why. The fat in cold water fish makes the walls of your cells a little more flexible, a little less stiff, including the cells lining your blood vessels. Flexible pipes handle pressure better than rigid ones. That's not poetry. That's plumbing. Worth noting which fish to lean toward. Salmon, sardines, mackerel, herring, and trout tend to run high in that beneficial fat and comparatively low in mercury. Swordfish, shark, and king mackerel run the other way, and I'd keep those occasional at most. Most guidance lands on roughly 2 servings a week for the average adult. That's a modest target, not an overwhelming one. And canned salmon on a cracker for lunch counts the same as a plated dinner. One thing worth mentioning to your doctor if you're already on a blood thinner: fish oil, in higher supplement doses especially, can add to that thinning effect. Doesn't mean stop eating salmon, means mention it. I bake mine with lemon and whatever herbs haven't given up in the garden yet. The Lord gave us the ocean for a reason, and I don't think it was only for scenery. Canned sardines count. Don't let anybody tell you otherwise. If the cost of fresh salmon gives you pause, frozen fillets from the freezer aisle carry essentially the same nutrition at a fraction of the price, and they keep for months without any loss worth worrying about. For those who genuinely can't stomach fish, algae-based omega-3 supplements exist now and deliver a similar profile without the fish itself, though the research behind whole fish remains considerably deeper and longer-standing. Sardines and mackerel also happen to be some of the least expensive fish at most markets, since they're smaller and lower on the food chain. Good nutrition doesn't always carry the price tag people assume it does. Number 3, and it's the shape that gives it away. Walnuts, still in the shell if you can manage it, cracked open if you can't. A meta-analysis of controlled trials found that regular walnut eaters saw a real improvement in how well their blood vessels widen and relax on demand, a measure doctors call flow-mediated dilation. In plain words, the inside lining of the blood vessels got more responsive, less rigid. Walnuts carry a plant version of omega-3 fat, plus an amino acid that helps the body make its own natural vessel-relaxing signal. Between the two, the vessels behave more like a garden hose than a copper pipe. Walnuts also came out ahead of other nuts in this particular research. Almonds and pistachios are fine foods, plenty of good data behind them too. But for this specific measure, walnuts are the ones that consistently move the needle across multiple trials. An ounce a day, about a small handful. That's the dose most of these trials used, and that's what I keep in a jar on the counter, not the pantry, because if it's out of sight, I forget it exists. Store them in the fridge or freezer once the bag's open. The fat that makes walnuts good for your heart is the same fat that goes rancid fastest sitting out on a warm counter. Walnuts were the anchor nut in one of the largest randomized diet trials ever run on the heart, which we'll get to further down this list. Consider this the introduction. Rare, actually, for a snack food to have this much research behind it. A quarter cup chopped over a salad does the same job as a plain handful if eating nuts straight off a spoon isn't your habit. I've tossed them into everything from oatmeal to roasted vegetables just to get that ounce in without thinking about it. Black walnuts, the wild variety some of you might have growing on your own property, carry a similar nutritional profile to the English walnut sold in stores, just considerably more work to crack open and clean. Number 4, and this is the one I keep in the good bottle, not the cooking bottle. Extra virgin olive oil, cold-pressed, the cloudier and greener the better most days. This isn't a small observational study. This is pre-dimed, one of the largest randomized trials ever run testing a diet against a control diet for heart disease. Over 7,000 people at high cardiovascular risk, followed for nearly 5 years. The group given a Mediterranean diet supplemented with extra virgin olive oil saw roughly a 30% lower relative risk of stroke, heart attack, and cardiovascular death compared to the control group. 30% in a randomized trial. That's about as strong as nutrition evidence gets. Olive oil isn't just a cooking fat. It's one of the most rigorously tested foods in the whole field of cardiovascular research. There's a reason this trial gets brought up so often. Most nutrition research is observational. Researchers watch what people already eat and look for patterns years later. Pre-dimed actually assigned people to a diet and followed them forward, a randomized design, and it still found a real effect. That combination is rare. The polyphenols in a good, unrefined oil seem to calm inflammation in the vessel walls and help keep the fats you eat from turning troublesome once they're in your bloodstream. A tablespoon or 2 a day, used in place of butter or a more processed cooking oil, not poured on top of everything you already eat without changing anything else. I use it on everything: bread, vegetables, the eggs in the morning. My hens don't lay less because of my grocery bill. Praise God for that, at least. Skip the light or extra light versions on the shelf. That's marketing, not nutrition. You want extra virgin, and you want it in dark glass, kept away from the stove's heat and light. Cost matters here too, and I know a good bottle isn't cheap. Buying a smaller bottle of the real thing and using it deliberately, rather than a large bottle of something diluted or old, tends to serve people better in the long run, both for their wallet and their arteries. Balsamic vinegar and a good olive oil, whisked together with a bit of mustard, makes a simple dressing that gets that daily tablespoon in without much thought, poured over whatever vegetables are on hand that evening. Number 5. And it announces itself before you even see it. Garlic, crushed, chopped, and left to sit a few minutes before it hits the pan. That resting time actually matters. More on that in a moment. A systematic review, pooling 11 trials, found garlic preparations lowered blood pressure more than placebo, with the effects strongest in people who already had hypertension, an average drop of over 8 points on the top number in that group. The sulfur compounds in garlic relax the smooth muscle around blood vessels, a little like loosening a garden hose that's been kinked too tight for years. Cooked garlic still carries benefit, just somewhat less concentrated than raw or lightly cooked. If raw garlic upsets your stomach, and for plenty of people it does, don't force it. A few cloves roasted whole and spread on bread like butter is gentler and still worthwhile. Now here's the caution I promised in the opening. Garlic thins the blood a bit on its own. If you're already taking a blood thinner or you've got surgery coming up, that's worth a phone call to your doctor or pharmacist before you start eating it by the clove. Doesn't mean avoid it. Means don't go from 0 to raw garlic cloves overnight without a conversation first. Garlic supplements in pill form vary wildly in how much active compound they actually deliver, since it depends on processing. The whole clove, fresh from your own kitchen, remains the more reliable source. Letting crushed garlic rest about 10 minutes before cooking gives the active compound time to fully develop. Toss it straight into hot oil the moment it's chopped, and you interrupt that window before it's finished. Onions, leeks, and shallots belong to the same family and carry some overlapping compounds, though garlic remains the most studied of the bunch by a wide margin. If garlic alone gets old fast in your cooking, rotating through its cousins keeps the habit interesting without losing the benefit entirely. Garlic powder from a jar carries some benefit too, though considerably less than fresh, since much of the active compound is lost in the drying process. Keep a jar for convenience, but lean on fresh cloves when the cooking allows for it. Number 6, and it's the one most people already know they should eat more of: spinach, kale, chard, collards, the dark leafy ones, not iceberg lettuce, which is mostly water and a nice place to rest a sandwich. A large meta-analysis drawing on data from dozens of long-running cohort studies found that people eating more green leafy vegetables consistently showed lower rates of cardiovascular disease and coronary heart disease, with one extra daily serving linked to roughly a 12 to 16% lower risk. That's an association, not proof of cause. Worth saying plainly, because the honest answer is scientists are still working out exactly which part of the leaf does the heavy lifting: the nitrates, the potassium, the folate, or some combination working together. In fact, one well-designed Swedish trial gave people either leafy greens or nitrate pills for 5 weeks and found no significant drop in blood pressure from either one. The story isn't as tidy as some headlines make it sound. Potassium deserves its own mention here. It helps your kidneys flush out extra sodium, which eases pressure on the vessel walls. A cup of cooked spinach delivers roughly twice the potassium of a medium banana. Most people find that hard to believe the first time I say it out loud. If you're on certain blood pressure or heart medications, particularly ones that already raise potassium, a sudden dramatic increase in leafy greens is still worth a quick mention to your doctor. Same principle as the garlic and the root coming up further down this list. More information for the person managing your care, never less. I still eat them most days, because the long-term association is real, even where the short-term mechanism is fuzzy. Wilt spinach into eggs. Chop kale small enough that nobody notices it's in the soup. Rare, honestly, that a food this unglamorous carries this much consistent long-term data behind it. Frozen spinach works fine here too, and it's often more affordable than fresh, wilting down into eggs or soup just as easily. I keep a bag in the freezer specifically because fresh greens wilt in my refrigerator faster than I can use a whole bunch before it turns. Cooking leafy greens does reduce their vitamin C content somewhat, though it makes certain other nutrients, including some of the carotenoids, easier for your body to absorb. Eating them both raw and cooked across the week covers more ground than sticking to just one preparation. Number 7, and it's the smallest food on this whole list: blueberries, fresh or frozen. Frozen actually locks the nutrients in at their peak, so don't feel like you're settling for less. In a 6-month randomized trial in people with metabolic syndrome, 1 to 2 cups of blueberries a day improved several markers tied to heart risk compared with a matched placebo powder. A separate pooled analysis of 44 trials found the pigment compounds in berries, called anthocyanins, lowered cholesterol and raised the protective kind, on top of calming some of the inflammatory chatter in the blood. Those pigments are basically the fruit's own defense system against wear and tear, the same blue-purple color you'd see staining a cutting board. Turns out that color does something once it's inside you, too. Wild blueberries, the small ones, carry even more of that pigment than the larger cultivated kind. Not a requirement, just a nice bonus if you find them. Compare that to some processed, heart-healthy snack products lining the same grocery aisle, dressed up with health claims on the box and not a fraction of this kind of trial behind them. A plain bag of frozen blueberries outperforms most of what's marketed harder than it. Freezing preserves the anthocyanins well, often better than fresh berries that spent a week in a truck before reaching the shelf. So frozen isn't the consolation prize here. It's frequently the better buy, and the research doesn't penalize it. A handful on the oatmeal from number 1, full circle, and no extra dishes to wash. Blackberries and blackcurrants carry a similar family of pigments if blueberries aren't available or affordable where you live. The exact numbers from these particular trials are specific to blueberries, but the broader principle, dark-colored berries carrying protective plant pigments, extends further than just the one fruit. A cup of blueberries runs remarkably low in calories for how much flavor and color it carries, which makes it an easy substitute for a more processed sweet when the craving for something sweet shows up in the evening. Number 8, and it's the food most closely tied to my grandmother's stove, in my memory anyway: beans, lentils, chickpeas, split peas, the whole pulse family. A meta-analysis of 10 controlled trials found that a diet built around non-soy legumes lowered total cholesterol by nearly 12 points and LDL by almost 8, compared with matched control diets. The fiber in legumes works a bit like the oats from number 1, slowing digestion and carrying some cholesterol out with it, while the plant protein takes the place of some of the fattier meat on the plate. Legumes bring something else to the table besides the cholesterol numbers. They're one of the few foods that lower a meal's overall glycemic load, meaning your blood sugar rises more gently after eating them alongside other foods. Steadier blood sugar and a steadier heart tend to travel together over the years. There's an old passage some of you may know, where a young man asks to eat only vegetables and legumes for 10 days instead of the rich food at the king's table, and comes out healthier for it at the end. I think about that more than you'd expect for a woman standing at a stove in Oregon. If beans give you trouble digestively, and I hear this complaint often, soaking dried beans overnight and rinsing well before cooking cuts down on that considerably. Canned beans, rinsed under the tap for a good 30 seconds, are gentler still. Half a cup, most days of the week. That's the target these trials used, and it's a lot less intimidating than it sounds. Canned is fine. Rinse it first to cut the sodium down some. Lentils cook faster than most other beans. No soaking required, which makes them the easiest entry point if this whole category feels unfamiliar. A pot of red lentils, some garlic from number 5, a little of that olive oil from number 4, makes a meal in under 30 minutes. Split peas and lentils cook down beautifully into a thick soup and freeze well besides, so a large pot made once serves several meals across a busy week without much extra effort. Number 9, and it's the one that shows up in every brunch photo these days: 1 avocado a day in a large randomized trial out of Penn State lowered total and LDL cholesterol over 26 weeks compared with people eating their usual diet. A separate feeding trial found something more specific. Avocado didn't just lower LDL, it lowered the small, dense kind of LDL particle, the sort most prone to getting stuck and turning troublesome in the vessel wall in the first place. The fat in an avocado is mostly the same monounsaturated kind found in olive oil, plus a healthy dose of potassium, which helps balance out sodium's effect on blood pressure. Avocados also carry a fair amount of fiber for a fruit most people think of purely as fat, close to 10 grams in a whole one, which works alongside the potassium and the good fats to support the numbers we're talking about here. They're calorie dense, no getting around that, so this is a food to add in place of something less useful, butter or mayonnaise on a sandwich, say, rather than piled on top of a diet that hasn't otherwise changed. Half an avocado most days, not the whole thing at every meal. I'd rather you eat it consistently for years than binge on it for a week and quit. Mashed on toast, or just spooned straight out of the shell with a little salt. Standing at the counter, both count. Ripeness matters for both taste and ease of use. A slight give under gentle thumb pressure at the stem end is what you're after. Not rock hard and not soft enough to leave a dent. Keep unripe ones on the counter, ripe ones in the refrigerator to slow them down a few extra days. The pit, for those who wonder, isn't something to eat, despite what a few social media trends have suggested over the years. It carries compounds your body isn't equipped to process the same way, and the trouble isn't worth it regardless. Number 10. This is the one I teased you with at the start. Cocoa flavanols, the compound found in cacao, tested in a large randomized trial called Cosmos, over 21,000 older adults, 5 years, cocoa extract capsules against a placebo. The main outcome, total cardiovascular events, didn't reach statistical significance. Worth saying plainly, because I promised you honest science, not headlines. But the secondary outcome, death from cardiovascular disease specifically, dropped by 27% in the group taking cocoa flavanols. Now, an important detail. That trial used a concentrated cocoa extract, about 500 milligrams of flavanols a day, roughly 80 of that being the most active compound. A candy bar isn't the same thing, not by a long shot, and most chocolate on a shelf has been processed in ways that strip a good deal of that flavanol content out. Cocoa also showed up favorably in earlier, smaller trials looking at blood pressure and vessel flexibility, going back well over a decade before Cosmos confirmed the mortality signal at this much larger scale. This wasn't a fluke result out of nowhere. So the honest kitchen table version is this: dark chocolate, 70% cacao or higher, in modest amounts, likely gives you some of what those flavanols do, just not guaranteed to match a clinical dose in a capsule. And it still comes with sugar and calories, so a square or two, not a whole bar. Look for chocolate, where cocoa or cocoa mass is the first ingredient listed, not sugar. Dutch processed cocoa, while it tastes milder, has typically lost a good portion of its flavanol content in that processing. Natural, unprocessed cocoa powder keeps more of it intact. I keep a bar in the cupboard for after supper. 1 square. My husband thinks I don't notice him taking 2. Rare, an indulgence with this much research behind it. White chocolate, worth mentioning plainly, contains none of the cocoa solids where these flavanols live, only cocoa butter, sugar, and milk. It doesn't carry any of what we're discussing here, regardless of how it's marketed on the wrapper. Cacao, in its rawest form, is actually quite bitter on its own, closer to unsweetened baking chocolate than anything resembling a candy bar. The sugar added along the way is what makes chocolate the treat most people know, not the cocoa itself. Number 11, and it's small enough to hide in almost anything. Ground flaxseed, not whole. Whole flax mostly passes straight through you, seeds intact, doing nothing but proving fiber exists. In a year-long randomized trial in patients with peripheral artery disease, most of them already on blood pressure medication, 30 grams of milled flaxseed a day dropped systolic blood pressure by about 10 points and diastolic by about 7. That's in the range some blood pressure medications aim for, though I want to be careful here. This was an addition on top of their existing medication, not a replacement for it, and nobody in that trial stopped their prescriptions to eat flax instead. Flax carries its own plant omega-3, plus compounds called lignans that seem to calm inflammation along the vessel wall, though that piece of the evidence is a bit less settled than the blood pressure finding itself. A quick note on interactions since we're building something of a theme today. Flax has mild blood thinning properties of its own, milder than garlic or the root coming up at number 15. But if you're already on medication for that, it's worth folding into the same conversation with your doctor rather than a separate one. The chickens were making an absolute racket outside my window the morning I first read that trial, which has nothing to do with flaxseed, but I remember it clearly for some reason. 2 tablespoons, ground fresh if you can, stirred into oatmeal or yogurt. It goes rancid faster once it's ground, so I keep mine in the freezer. Chia seeds carry a similar plant omega-3 profile and don't require grinding the way flax does, since their shells are soft enough to break down on their own. A reasonable substitute on weeks you're out of flax, though the specific blood pressure trial we discussed was done with flax, not chia. Ground flax also works as an egg substitute in baking, 1 tablespoon mixed with 3 of water standing in for 1 egg in most recipes, which is a handy trick if you're baking for someone with an egg allergy in the house. Number 12. And this one comes with a genuine lesson in how research actually works. Pomegranate, the juice or the seeds themselves, called arils, the ruby-colored little jewels inside. A small, early trial, just 19 patients with narrowed carotid arteries, found something remarkable. After 3 years of daily pomegranate juice, artery wall thickness measured 35% thinner than at the start, while the group not drinking it got 9% thicker over the same stretch. That's the kind of number that gets a nutrition trend started overnight. It's also a tiny study, and tiny studies don't always hold up. A much larger follow-up trial, nearly 300 people at moderate heart disease risk, followed for 18 months, found no significant difference in overall artery thickness progression between the pomegranate group and the control group. It did find a benefit in the smaller group of people who started with the highest markers of cellular wear and tear. But for most people in that bigger, more careful trial, the dramatic early result didn't repeat. That's not a failure. That's exactly how good science is supposed to work. We follow where the evidence actually leads, even when the follow-up story is less exciting than the first headline. None of this means pomegranate is worthless. It means the honest picture is more modest than the first headline promised, which is true of a great many foods once the bigger, better controlled trials come in. I'd rather tell you that than let you believe something dramatic that doesn't fully hold. The juice concentrates sugar without the fiber that whole arils provide, so if you're watching blood sugar closely, eating the seeds themselves is the gentler choice over a full glass of juice. I still eat it because it's a genuinely good source of plant compounds either way, and it turns a plain bowl of yogurt into something that looks like it took effort. Fresh arils versus bottled juice comes down to preference and budget more than nutrition. Though whole arils give you fiber, the bottled version leaves behind entirely. I pick whichever's actually in front of me at the store that week. Pomegranate molasses, a thick reduced syrup sold in most international grocery sections, carries a concentrated version of these same compounds and works beautifully drizzled over roasted vegetables or stirred into a salad dressing. Number 13. And it's a fruit most people cook like a vegetable, myself included. Tomatoes, and specifically the red pigment inside them called lycopene. A meta-analysis pooling data on lycopene and tomato intake across dozens of studies found that people with the highest lycopene levels had roughly a 26% lower risk of stroke and a 37% lower risk of dying of any cause compared to those with the lowest levels. That's an association from long-term observational data, not a randomized guarantee, so hold it with an open hand rather than a fist. Still, a separate review of actual intervention trials found lycopene supplementation lowered systolic blood pressure by an average of nearly 6 points. Here's the practical bit nobody mentions. Raw tomato gives you less usable lycopene than cooked tomato. Something about the heat breaking down the cell walls makes the pigment easier for your body to absorb. And a little fat alongside it, the olive oil from number 4, helps even more. So a jar of good marinara isn't a lesser choice than a fresh salad here. In this one specific case, it might be the better one. Watermelon and pink grapefruit carry lycopene too, in smaller amounts, if tomatoes aren't your thing. But cooked tomato products, sauce, paste, soup, remain the most concentrated and best studied source by a wide margin. Commercial ketchup, for what it's worth, does technically carry lycopene, but between the added sugar and the sodium, I wouldn't call it a health food dressed up as one. A good marinara with real olive oil is the better trade. I roast a tray of them most weeks until they collapse, then freeze what I don't use that night. Sun-dried tomatoes concentrate the lycopene considerably since most of the water's been removed, worth keeping in mind if fresh or canned tomatoes aren't within reach. A small handful goes a long way in a pasta dish or salad. Green, unripe tomatoes carry considerably less lycopene than fully ripened red ones, since the pigment develops as the fruit ripens. Let them finish ripening on the counter rather than eating them green if lycopene is what you're after. Number 14. This is the one most people boil, drain, and pour straight down the sink. Beetroot, and specifically that deep red cooking water everybody throws away. A meta-analysis of clinical trials found beetroot juice meaningfully lowered both the top and bottom blood pressure numbers in people with hypertension, an effect that held up for up to 90 days of regular use. Beets carry natural dietary nitrate, which your body converts into a gas called nitric oxide. That gas tells the muscle around your blood vessels to relax and widen, a little like opening the windows in a stuffy room on a hot afternoon. Blood moves easier, pressure drops. That cooking water I mentioned, save it. Use it as the base for soup, or water the garden with it once it's cooled. Either way, that's where a good deal of the nitrate ends up, and pouring it down the drain is pouring out most of the benefit. Beet greens, the leafy tops most people cut off and discard before they even get to the store, are edible and carry their own nutrition, closer to the spinach and chard from number 6 than to the root itself. Don't let those go to waste either, if you're buying them with the tops still on. If beets turn your urine or stool a pink or reddish tint the next day, that's harmless, just the pigment passing through. Startled more than one person the first time it happened to them, myself included, years back. Roasted, in a salad, or juiced raw if your stomach tolerates it. Earthy is the honest word for the taste. Some of you will love it right away. Some of you will need a few tries. There's something about a root that grows entirely out of sight, doing its quiet work underground, that feels like it was made on purpose. Canned beets carry a good deal less of that nitrate than fresh or roasted, since much of it leaches into the canning liquid, which most people drain and discard right along with it. Fresh, roasted at home, remains the more reliable choice if the blood pressure benefit is what you're after. Beet powder, a dried and ground version sold in some health food stores, offers a shelf-stable alternative for those who don't care for the taste or texture of the fresh root, though whole beets remain the better studied and more affordable option. Number 15, the last one on the list, and the one that'll stain your cutting board a color you won't get out. Turmeric, fresh root or ground powder, and specifically the compound inside it called curcumin. A controlled trial in healthy adults found that 200 milligrams of curcumin over 8 weeks improved how well the blood vessels widen on demand, by a clinically meaningful 3 percentage points compared with placebo. A separate pooled analysis of 7 trials found turmeric and curcumin supplements lowered LDL cholesterol in people already carrying some cardiovascular risk. There's a reason curry-heavy diets in parts of the world have drawn research interest for cardiovascular and cognitive health both. Turmeric shows up in nearly all of them, in meaningful, regular amounts, not as an occasional garnish. Here's the honest catch. Curcumin on its own is absorbed poorly by the body. Most of it passes straight through. Pairing it with a pinch of black pepper, or a bit of fat, helps your body actually take it up. And here's the second real caution I promised back at the start. Curcumin, especially at supplement doses, can thin the blood somewhat, same family of caution as the garlic back at number 5. On a blood thinner, or scheduled for surgery, that's a conversation worth having with your doctor before you start taking it in concentrated form. In cooking amounts, stirred into a soup or a rice dish, it's a different story than a concentrated capsule, and most people don't need to think twice about it there. A teaspoon of ground turmeric with a few turns of black pepper, stirred into scrambled eggs, rice, or a pot of soup, is a realistic daily habit. That's a more sustainable target than a supplement bottle you forget about after 2 weeks. 15. That's the whole list. Rare to find one this long where every single item held up under an honest look at the research. Fresh turmeric root, when you can find it, taste noticeably brighter and more peppery than the dried ground version most kitchens keep on hand. Either works for the research we've discussed, so don't feel you need to hunt down the fresh route specifically if the powder's what's convenient. A cup of warm milk with a bit of turmeric and black pepper stirred in, sometimes called golden milk, has become popular in recent years, and while it hasn't been tested in trials to the same degree as the compound itself, it's a pleasant, low-risk way to build the habit. Now that's 15 real, published research sitting in an ordinary kitchen, most of it probably within arm's reach of you tonight. Not one of them promises to fix a heart on its own, and I'd be lying to you if I said otherwise. Genetics, movement, sleep, stress, they all sit at that same table too. Food is one seat, an important one, but only one. What these 15 have in common is patience. Nobody in any of these trials saw results overnight. Weeks, months, sometimes years of steady, unremarkable eating, the kind that doesn't make for exciting television but does show up in the blood work eventually. Nothing you heard today replaces your doctor, your cardiologist, or the medication you've already been prescribed. If anything here made you curious, that curiosity belongs in your next appointment, not instead of it. I'd print a couple of these citations out, honestly, dog-eared and a little coffee-stained is fine, and hand them across the desk at your next visit. Most doctors welcome that more than people expect. It opens a conversation instead of closing one. That's a habit worth building slowly, one appointment at a time, not something to overwhelm your doctor with all 15 studies at once. This channel exists because I still believe food deserves the same careful, honest attention we give a prescription bottle. Not more, not instead of, alongside. 20 years at the bedside taught me that the two, food and medicine, were never meant to compete with each other. They were always meant to work from the same side of the table. If that's useful to you, subscribing helps me keep pulling apart journal articles so you don't have to sit with the paywall and the jargon yourself. Here's my question for you this week, down in the comments. Which of these 15 is already growing in your garden or sitting in your pantry right now? And which one are you trying for the very first time? Whatever you decide to add to your plate this week, I hope it's done with a little patience and a little gratitude for the ground it came from in the first place. Be blessed, and I'll see you next time.